Welcome to the Consultants Way podcast, your go-to resource for all things professional services consulting. Brought to you by McMahon & Ransford, a strategy consulting firm with over 30 years of experience helping B2B organizations achieve sustainable growth, and the Consultants Way, the leading comprehensive consultant development program. Hosted by Dean McMahon and Anthony Paluska, we share expert insights, firsthand experiences, and conversations with industry leaders on the topics that interest you most.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of their employer, company, or affiliated organizations.
Welcome to the Consultants Way podcast. You've got Anthony Paluska. I'm joined here with Dean McMahon, and today we are lucky to be joined by Chris Holmgren. Chris, welcome to the show. For our listeners out there that may not be familiar with you and your background, could you share a little bit about your journey through professional services and kind of what brought you to the point that you're at today?
Yeah, for sure. So I started my professional services career as an individual contributor in the event level space. I then grew into sort of a management role, right? But my career in professional services really always been focused around the customer, right? Focusing on their strategic initiatives and then making sure that leading the global teams that, support those customers. I've been working with professional services, leading them teams for about 10 years, navigating kind of the growth and the changes that have been across everything over the last 10 years, and then some tough challenges, right? Leading and scaling teams during pandemic, right? Pre and post pandemic. And then all of those things taught me a lot about the adaptability and the resilience that, leaders of professional services that we need today.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And I know that topic of scaling teams and having that agility in the teams is a topic that we want to spend some time on today. Look, the scaling of teams that happened during the rapid growth that we saw pre-COVID or post-COVID, depending on sort of where you were in that, right? Everybody suffered a little bit of a change in their team dynamic, right? Both we had the ramp up and then we had some sort of downturn, and navigating our way through that. Two very different worlds to operate in. So take us through your specific journey there. How did you approach those two different situations, and what were some of the key lessons you learned?
Yeah, one of the first things we had to do, right? So I was in the digital event space at the time, right? So everyone had to go digital, right? There was no more in-person meetings. There were no more in-person trade shows. Everyone had to go digital, right? So what we really focused on doing was identifying the team's strengths early, right? We knew that, hey, if things were shutting down, we needed to build the team. We needed to have enough people to be able to support the clients. So we found the right people that we had in-house. We brought in, different consulting agencies to try to help with the staffing levels and finding the right roles for the right people, right? Because it's not just about adding headcount, it's about making sure that the right people are in the right spot. So we emphasize the importance of training and adaptability of our team, right? Making sure that the staff members knew exactly what was going on and that they were in the right position to help our clients. And we had to learn how to pivot during those times, right? We had to prioritize certain key elements of training and execution. Once we got post-COVID and things started scaling down a bit, we had to retain institutional knowledge. Like that was the key part of making sure that we had the right team in place. We didn't want to just cut people for the sake of cutting people. No one does. We want to keep all that knowledge. We spent that time, we spent that money training these folks. We want to make sure that they have a spot or, that we kept that institutional knowledge in the company, right? Try to do more with less, but also making sure that we're maximizing efficiency. It's not always easy, but try to make it work.
Yeah. So just, for the audience, right? You're in the digital event space. You're in a you see a rise in your business, the same rise that Zoom and web conferencing and all those kinds of things saw a rise in the business. And so you're struggling with, okay, how do we keep up with demand? We're struggling probably a little bit with, we have a bunch of new clients that have never worked with us in this kind of way before, maybe not even thought about doing digital events because now they're forced to pivot. And then you're probably having to evolve some of your own delivery models because because despite you being digitally focused originally, things have changed with all of that. Are we looking at all three of those correctly? Is there one of those that you had to focus or weigh more heavily than the other? How did you balance I mean, three very, I mean, and everybody's struggled with this during COVID and adjusted, but like those are three very different shifts, even though somebody might from the outside looking in, look at your business and say, you guys should have been prepared for this, right? You're in this space. This is the business model that you've built. So how did you navigate that?
So it started with just transparency, right? Internal transparency, talking with my leaders, talking with my team, making sure that everyone understood where we were going, right? And what the plan was. We had to scale services that we offered. We had to scale the team, right? So we had a big project management service that we offered that just wasn't scalable for the amount of things that we had come in. So we had to pare that down. We had to then grow the team. And then on the way back down, we had to contract the team, right? So we had to then focus on getting everything out the door and making sure that clients knew what we were doing, staff knew what we were doing, leadership knew what we were doing, all the way up to the C-suite, basically saying, here's what the plan is, and being that proactive, answering that why proactively, right? Answering the question of what are we doing so that everyone is clear on what the plan is.
Yeah, and you talked a bit about recognizing your team's strengths and weaknesses early in the process. In practice, how did you go through that, identifying kind of those individual nuances? What makes the right person right for this particular role or function, and so that you can get the most out of the team that you did have in place?
Yeah, so I meet a lot with my teams when I'm managing a team. We have weekly stand-ups, right? So that's the time when I can get a sense of what's going on with the team. We talk about everything that's going on, and in addition to the one-on-ones that we do, and me hopping in on client calls, right? But I like to think of when I'm scaling teams or when I'm working with teams and assigning teams to different clients, think of it like that matchmaking element, right? I know my team, I know how they work, I know how they learn, I know how they teach, right? Because our services are essentially in teaching clients how to work with our services. If you're a software as a service platform, right? You're going to need to be able to teach your client. And so when I would get involved pre-sales, I would learn how the client would do things. And then once we got to the point of having someone on my team work with that client, then I would say, all right, I know that Joe is going to pair really, really well with Keith, right? They're going to work together. I see that they're going to vibe, and it's going to be a good relationship, right? When personalities and expectations are kind of aligned, it creates that working environment that is ultimately, really strong, and that boosts your outcomes.
Chris, how many did you, I mean, percent wise, how many did you add? How many did you have to take out?
So we added, I would say probably about 30 or 40% in terms of part-timers and contractors and full-time staff. And then we wound up cutting back, I'd say about 20 of that, I believe. But yeah, it was a big swing.
How did you balance the part-time, full-time contractor mix, and what were some of the things that led to that decision?
So, dollars, obviously, right? And who you can hire, and the ease of pulling in a contractor, and training costs, right? Training plays a huge role in, spending time coaching a team and training a team and learning how to handle different things in terms of working with these clients, whether they're, a full-time contractor where they are, working with your team day to day, or they're a specific event level contractor, someone on a call like this just doing some editing, or making sure everyone's microphones are connected, or just doing little tasks, right? Making sure that they have the proper amount of training across the board really is how we kind of focused on that.
We love the idea that you were so proactive in communicating. We find that PS sometimes doesn't know how to communicate upwardly. Did you already have a good communication line to the C-suite before and did you find they like to hear from you in a data-centric mode or more of a conversational mode? How did that work?
Yeah, so we had a really good feedback chain kind of going up, and that's one of the things that we prioritize as a leadership team in PS is making sure that we knew how leadership wanted the data and knew what was important and knew how to aggregate it all, right? So me and my colleagues at the director level would all have meetings to kind of make sure all of our data was appropriate, right? Was in the same format, in the same using the same words, so that everyone knew what was going up and everyone knew what the roadmap was. So using that feedback loop, and that works both ways too. It works with clients, like feedback how the project is going, but also what the team is doing, right? Making sure that everyone from the client side to internally knows exactly what's going on, so we can continuously improve and refine any sort of approaches that come on.
Let's talk a little bit about how do you keep your team motivated and bought in through the journey on both sides of it. But let's start with the positive side of things. When we're scaling and growing really quickly, we will often, and I'm sure you did, find ourselves in a situation where our people are stretched thinner than they've been before, and we absolutely need them more than we ever have because we are adding all this talent, and that talent's coming in perhaps at different salary points, and also, right, there's all these different things that, whether they're explicit or implicit, cause friction or concerns on the team. How do you, during those periods of resource scarcity, how do you motivate your team? How do you keep morale high? How do you just make sure that you are able to retain that talent and get them to continue working for you and supporting the vision that you're trying to drive on behalf of the organization?
Yeah, then look, as I mentioned, training plays a huge role, right? So we spend all that time coaching the team on different things, like different learning aspects about active listening, expectation settings, handling different conversations professionally, knowing, when it comes to a client, knowing when to push ahead or to push back when necessary. Internally, what I would do is I would work very closely with everyone on my team to know exactly where they were, and also to be able to have them know that they can rely on me, right? As the director, I'm not, someone standing over them going, do your job, do your job, do your job. I had a high school teacher that did that. I hate that. That's not how I operate. That's not how people should operate. It is, hey, you were working with me, you're working for me. I'm going to be there to help you. I'm that kind of advocate of, let's make sure we know what's going on. And, if there's a time when you need help, I can just jump in, right? We're communicating, the lines of communication are open. I know what you're doing, you know what's going on with the team, and that if there's something that, you need help with, I can just hop in and be with you.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that leadership attribute that you're describing is critical, especially in difficult times or waves, right? Either growth or decline. But no matter what, right? There's this communication and this level of commitment and integrating yourself into the business without doing everybody's job or micromanaging them at the same time, that you describe both in those one-on-one meetings, but then also in the matchmaking process that you talked about. That can become very time consuming very quickly, and Chris only scales so far, particularly when your team is growing. It,
I don't know. Chris can go really far.
he's very, very flexible, and can use, uh, but any systems or approaches that you put in place to make sure that you could continue to support doing all the things that you found valuable in this process, as you just added more and more team members to have to do, and more clients to have to do that for.
Yeah, so we utilize Salesforce, and I kind of created a dashboard for all of my employees for what they were doing, so that if we weren't able to, go deep into all their projects, I could see at a high level all of their things that were going on, right? So we use Salesforce, we use Asana or Monday as a project plan, where I could see everything that's going on at a high level to be able to know where I needed to pinpoint and jump in. So it was more of a front-loaded effort, right? There's a lot of effort at the beginning. During growth phases, motivation's easy, right? People want to learn. People are going through things and they have that excitement, they're driving engagement, and so getting all of that data set up at the beginning and making it in a scalable way, like just being able to copy and paste reports or copy and paste dashboards to the new user makes it real easy because I know what's going on and I know those templates are there and I know how to read them, right? So getting all of the data into a spot where I can see, all right, Anthony, I know what you're doing today. I know what you're doing tomorrow. On Wednesday, you look like you're pretty slammed. What do you need, right? So I can use that as kind of like that roadmap tool to say, all right, I know what's going on. Here's what's happening. Here's where I can see that you need help. For sure. Yeah. So like if a project's off task or if it's overdue or if it's, if there's things that are piling up, like what I would see is the little day-to-day tasks, the easy things that are just piling up, right? The things that it only takes a click, but it's a click that I can do later, right? I see them piling up. All right, let's take a minute, see what's going on. It's what I like to do is kind of foster that culture of trust, right? I know that we're busy, right? Things are going crazy and I have a system in place where I can see what's going on your side and see what's on your plate. If I need to hop in and help, that's fine. But I need you to trust that in me that it's going to be okay, right? At the end of the day, it's going to be fine, right? And that we are in this all together. Leadership has your back. I'm here to stay engaged and make sure that we're all committed with the customer. We focus on celebrating big wins, right? Wins, big or small, whether it was, recognizing a job well done or kind of meeting as a team to say, hey, we knocked this project out of the park. This is, kind of keeping that environment and that culture of trust and support, strong.
Chris, would you have seen if your organization was maybe at a different scale that you could have taken that capability you were doing and that data and push it down to a project, someone who managed 6 or 7 people and kept all that going? It seems like that is a scalable tool to enable other people to do. All right.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so being able to, and one of the things that I know my system, anything that I build, I'm sure is not perfect, right? So what I would like to do and what I have done is if I have a director or a manager under me who's, in charge of those folks saying, all right, here's what I do. This works for me. If it doesn't work for you, I'll help you find a way that it does work for you, right? People learn different ways. People, teach different ways. I'm all about whatever makes your life easier at the end of the day. Let's do it, because I don't want to be struggling at the end of the day. I don't want to feel exhausted at the end of the day just from sitting and looking at spreadsheets or doing my day-to-day job, which I like, right? I would much rather be exhausted knowing that I put all of my effort and crushed it than being like, oh my God, I'm going to pull my hair out. I don't know what's going on. I'm so underwater, right? But being able to say, all right, this is how we're working with things and this is how I work it. How do you need to work it? And that works with clients too, right? Saying, all right, how do you want this project to go? Yes, we are the subject matter experts. Here's our plan, but that might not work for you. So let's build it out. Let's make sure that the structure that we have in place for our projects is malleable enough to be able to fit with whatever client needs to jump in there and do it.
Yeah. Chris, do you have an experience during that journey that you found humorous? That struck you as like, man, this is something I'm going to remember forever?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So a few years ago, we were working with a very large enterprise client. We'd been working with them for a few months on building out their event. And so my team was working with their day-to-day team, building everything out. And about a week before we were going to start all our testing to make sure things were done, we got an email from their corporate office saying, hey, we've just purchased a national 11-week ad that's going to focus on this platform. And it starts next week. Not can we, not are you guys ready to go? It's like, we bought this ad, which costs tens of millions of dollars. So the whole team, client included, just said, all right, let's pivot. Let's make sure this is all done. But with, proper communication, project management, working with the team, we had that trust built up through our processes, through, the matchmaking that we talked about earlier. But, everything went off without a hitch. It was fine. But it was one of those, you read the email like, I didn't just read that. I know that they don't mean Friday. They don't
This
mean
is a joke. This is a joke. That's really funny. No.
It is April Fool's Day. We're recording this, so yeah, it's a perfect day for a joke like that. Surprise!
Yeah.
The entire project has changed.
Right, right. Move that goalpost a little bit, but it worked, and the ads ran, and the traffic went through the roof, and it was wonderful. It worked out great, but it was one of those. We just kind of sat there internally and like, we need to have a meeting, and we need to loop in some of the big bosses, and then we need to talk to their big, like, make sure that everyone's still, understanding that this is now. We just ramped up crunch time and made it even more. So it worked out really, really well, but it was
And I hope you were able to charge them a lot more.
yeah, right.
Yeah, it highlights, right, the flexibility and agility is such a critical aspect to anybody in professional services because there's always surprises, right? There's nothing that's ever gone according to plan, despite our best efforts to create a project plan. And the same thing goes as you've been talking about with our team and our staffing model and how we grow and scale depending on things that are sometimes within our control, but sometimes outside of our control. And so I think we've touched on a bunch of different very practical tips for how to lead a team through growth or challenges or just any kinds of changes. But if you would, if there's a couple of key takeaways that you'd like to leave with the audience on this broader topic, could you highlight a few of those for us?
Absolutely. One of the things I think is top of mind is you get the right people in the right roles, right? Scaling up or down, it's making sure that people are where they are and where they can thrive. That's key, right? Relationships, internal, external, client facing, different departments, relationships are what really drive success. It's whether a team dynamic or client interactions, those are, strong relationships are a foundation of a successful product. And then adaptability, right? Making sure you're able to stop and pivot and say, all right, this isn't going to work. And having the team have the faith in knowing that their decisions are going to be backed up, right? Because they're the ones on the front line going to be making that decision. Hey, we need to pivot. I'm going to pivot, and here's why. And being able to say, yep, this is what's going to set us apart, right? We're going to make sure that our project plan is scalable, but also malleable enough to say, all right, we're not even going to touch this. It's not needed. We don't need it, or we need to bring this other piece in, right? So that adaptability really kind of sets that groundwork for making sure that the team is successful.
I think that's great, and I'll add one because it actually underpins all three of those, and because you've highlighted it so much is just this need for communication with your team, communication with your clients, communication to your leaders, just communication at all levels enables you to do all those three things that you just talked about, and that's, I mean, from this conversation, that's my big takeaway is your focus on communication and proactively making sure that you and others have all the information you need to act and be successful.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Chris, thank you so much. It's been great, and we really like that you stressed training of your people because that's what we're all about. So, great job. We hope to see you again, and keep us posted on all the fun things going on.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. It's been great.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Well, I don't think we've had anybody, and I think I'm right about this, who's so articulate about how to manage, right? And we use the complexity of growth and decline, if you will, because of COVID. But all this stuff is primary good no matter what. And I particularly love the focus on I can't be my words, not his. I can't be adaptive unless my people know what they need to do. Right. I always think of PS, and we talk about it a lot, is like the second baseman needs to know what to do with the ball when they get the ball in this unique situation at this time in the game. And he talked a lot about that, circuitously, but I thought it was really, really meaningful.
Yeah, no, too many leaders either for their own reasons, right? Whatever they've come from and what their um, focus areas are in the past or what they're passionate about or whatever. Or because of a product of their team, find themselves in this situation where they're over involved in either doing the work that their team should be doing or telling their teams what to do. And he was much more focused on my responsibility here is to understand enough about the client situation and about you as an individual uniquely and what you need, and be there as a to help you get there and help make sure that you're aligned with the clients in the right way, that the business runs successfully. But you're putting the right people in the right places, as he would say. And if you do that, then you're going to get the outcomes without you as a leader having to dive into the weeds of actually doing the work, which works against the entire growth of the organization anyway.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Great guy, very clear. Love to have him back. Anything else, Anthony, that you took away from Chris?
Yes. Is the only thing I'll add is what I added at the end of Chris's summary, which was communication is so critical there, and clearly he's an effective communicator. Being an effective communicator and at least being deliberate about all communication events and what the intent of those are to help stitch together your understanding of a project, of your team, of the client's needs, of whatever, is essential to doing this really, really effectively. And so I just want to reinforce that point. But that's all.
That's great. All right, take us home.
All right. If you enjoyed this one, check us out on YouTube and your podcast channel and click the like and subscribe buttons. Check Dean and I out on our individual LinkedIn pages. If you want to reach out to us, you can do that there, or you can always email us at podcast@consultantsway.com. Looking forward to hearing from everybody. We'll see you next time.